Hello, friends. Welcome to our Southern Community, your public affairs program exploring the people and the issues of the environment, energy, and economics in our region. Today's program is an overview, a close look on the radio, if you will, with the transition movement, Transition Asheville, and there is so much to this discussion. We have with us Jonah Bolt, who is a Housing and Building Work Action Committee member on the team, and he does so much more. Jonah, welcome to the program.
Excellent. Thank you, Ned, for having me. How's it going?
I'm doing just fine. It is a pleasure to finally catch up with you. We're both busy guys, and this has been, our third try to sit down.
Good to finally sit down and get it, though, because we lots to talk about.
And you do a lot more than just Housing and Building Action Committee. How about giving us a thumbnail sketch, because you're a busy man around town?
I recently moved to Asheville about 2 years ago, and when I moved here, I moved into a very progressive community, as most Ashevilleans, as they call them, know, and I started learning about this thing called self-sustainability, organic, living green. As I jumped into that and really dove into it head first, I found the transition movement, and that's where it first came from, with me getting involved with the whole movement of transition. My father used to work with Buckminster Fuller, with Bucky, building geodesic domes. So my whole life I've sort of been educated on it, on being self-sustained and structures like that, like the geodome, but never really got into it myself until I found the transition movement. So with that, I've been a member for about a year and a half now. Like you said, I'm head of the Housing and Building Group, and what we try to do is educate the community on different things they can do to cut energy in their house, and just do different workshops. We have guest speakers and stuff like that. On another level of existence, I would say, I have my own radio show, as you know, and that's been around for about 2 years now. That's Starseed Energy Radio, where I cover topics just like you. We cover political, geopolitical, earth changes, economics, stuff like that, and really dive into a lot of issues. There's a lot of things happening around the planet right now, and being self-sustained, I think, is the most important thing that people really need to get a grip on, and that's what I've been focusing a lot on my radio show. But I also work a lot with the community. I'm also a member and a partner of an organization called Living is So Big, which promotes life appreciation. So I'll be traveling with them for about 3 weeks, and a couple weeks going to Missouri and Utah, doing speaking engagements and talking to people and talking to the youth about waking up and appreciating life. You know, so many people are having hard times right now with the economy, and just it's a real great time for a lot of people around the planet, and promoting life appreciation is really important for people. Take a deep breath, take a sit back, and really appreciate how beautiful, how great it is to just be alive. And so many people don't even think about that because they're so worried about bills and food and this, that it's really an eye-opener, and it's magical to see people react and just, put down their reasons to live. That's what we have people do, it. Write down, give us some reasons why you're alive, why life is so good. Other self-sustainable projects, initiatives that I've started, we're trying to do a self-sustainable community for the homeless. So that's another project I have going. Anything I could do to be of service and help to spread awareness about self-sustainability that I have become so passionate about is really important to me. So there's a number of different things that I do, but really it all weaves together on one platform to really help the community.
Your travels, Jonah, around the world, and your experiences with so many groups like that gives me an opportunity to have us look back ever so slightly to the beginnings of the transition movement, and Rob Hopkins and the British Isles and so forth. That's something that had, in many ways, that same vision of people working together, looking toward the future, appreciating what we have in difficult times. And the transition movement has been defined in a few different ways, but it really seems as though it's literally a transition for people and society from an unsustainable paradigm into one that actually is sustainable.
Robert Hopkins started transition movement it's been about almost 5 years now, and Asheville is the 88th transition town, official transition town in the U.S., but there is over 500 official transition towns throughout the world. It has spread to every continent all over the world, and it's exactly what you said. It's about getting the communities back together again. So many people with the last 10, 20, 30 years have lost that sense of community. We're fortunate here in Asheville. We have a very tight, small community and very close, but most people, I've lived in New York and Florida, don't even know their neighbors. So the transition movement gives that sense of community back, as well as getting together local resources, local people with skills sharing, going back to bartering, things that have been around for thousands of years, just taking it simple like that. So the transition movement is really something that anybody on really any level, because there's so many different action groups, to really take part in and learn and share.
All the skill sharing and the community aspect of it is something that so many people I've met find so exciting, that maybe in some ways because it's been missing from their lives, but the idea of moving forward while going backwards, such as learning to share seeds and heirloom gardening, or building techniques that might be rammed earth or cob or cordwood, and many techniques that have been around for thousands of years. It's really interesting to see people light up when they learn something new that happens to be old.
For myself, when I first learned about being self-sustained and what that really meant, like living off grid or just getting your power from solar power, growing your own food, using a water cistern to collect your own water, realizing that if I did all that, I wouldn't have all these other worries in my life, like bills and mortgages and car payments. Who wouldn't want to do this? So it was really a common sense and eye-opener for me to really spread to my generation. I'm young, I'm 33, but one of the things I try to focus on is really getting the youth involved in the transition movement, because that's really where the energy is. And if I could get this concept into a lot of my friends, heads about the ideas and concepts behind self-sustainability, it will help them so much more to possibly live a better life and sustain their family and sustain everything in their life. It's really important.
And that also includes careers these days, because it's not a hobby to be self-sustaining and to be self-sufficient. There are degrees in sustainability now, for example, at AB Tech, and there's the excellent programs that have been around for years at Boone, at App State, and the green jobs, if we use that often abused term, but the green jobs are really where a lot of the good money is these days, whether it's solar installation on systems, wind power, weatherization, green building, community energy efficiency. I mean, there's a whole list of these things. These are good paying jobs that contribute to that community as a whole.
Absolutely. And some of the most exciting things about being with transition and talking about new jobs is new technology development. There's so many new technologies that have come out of the transition movement where people now have a platform to apply these new technologies. I've seen a lot of that with like the different TED Talks and open ecology, format communities, and now intentional communities are popping up all over. So it's very important because it's not just creating new jobs, but new, like you said, means and ways of living of life, sustainable with new technologies. So that's one of the most exciting things that I like about it, is learning about these new technologies and new types of systems that we can implement to cut down our fossil fuel consumption and other things like that.
What is the general breakdown for the folks in the Transition Asheville group movement in terms of their ages and background? I mean, not specifically. Are they all young tykes in their 20s? We have got some senior citizens like myself that are pushing 60. What's the range?
Well, I would say most of them, I'm on the Common Table board. There is one other person in his 30s, Dylan Hamilton, and most of the people that are involved are in their 50s and 60s. It is an older, vibe and people on the board, which is why I take so much, action in putting up flyers at the Warren Wilson College, and I go to Monterey College. I mean, I put up flyers to bring in the youth to a lot of the networking events and things that we do to educate people. So there isn't a big young, vibe happening in transition. So that's one of the things I'm trying to do. And I think that's probably across the board. Self-sustainability, a lot of these things aren't really taught to so many people in mainstream school. And, and there's a reason for that, which we can get into. But, so when I even talk about this to my peers or people younger than me, they don't even know, well, what do you mean? What is self-sustainability? What is that, a solar power panel? They don't even understand it's a means of life. It's a way of life. It's a way to better your life, to better your family. There's so much to it. So definitely would like to see more of the youth involved. But as of right now, it's more of people around your age.
And that's an interesting thing because the youth have so much more to gain in so many ways when we look at this bigger picture of the future. Just chronologically speaking, if I'm lucky, I've got 30 years, and I think the actuarial tables say I've got about 20 to go. Whereas the younger generation today has, in a literal sense, their life ahead of them and a lot more uncertainty. Things have changed. When I was a kid, way back when we rode dinosaurs, according to some people, it seemed like, well, we could pull this off, and the horizon looked pretty rosy. But we know today that we're running out of fossil fuel. We know that we're poisoning the planet with nuclear power. We know that we've got problems with genetically modified organisms, and the list goes on. But that's really a generational change, and one would think that the younger generation might be paying a little more attention to it.
I would agree with you 100%. I think also what's happened is it's society's taken such a turn, like taking in just schools, the music and arts out of schools, and the creative things that really have people think. They're not taught to think outside the box. They're taught what they're given in school, and that curriculum is not how things used to be. They've cut a lot of that creativeness out, and just like you said, I mean, things are really hard now, across the country. People unemployed, poverty. There's so many things really that are really taking precedence over a lot of the information that's being put out in the news and things like that, that people just get distracted worrying about food on their table and life, and worrying about, sending their kids to school. So I think a lot of the youth doesn't even really have a chance to catch wind of this information, that there is a better way of living and being self-sustained. That's really important to get back into the system, the school system. That's what transition really does, is we do different events and things like that to educate people, free workshops on permaculture. We really try to do what we can to educate the community on a new way of living, which is to sustain yourself.
We'll return to our conversation in just a moment. Our Southern community is made possible by the support of Sundance Power Systems, dedicated to leading the clean energy transition. Sundance Power Systems has installed hundreds of renewable energy systems since 1995. Empowering people with solar, Sundance Power Systems embodies a deep commitment to sustainability by operating a carbon-neutral office and embracing opportunities to support educational events and initiatives in the community. Visit their website, sundancepower.com, for a wealth of clean energy resources and their clean energy work. We're back with Jonah Bolt with the Transition Asheville Movement, the Housing and Building Work Action member and youth advocate, among other things. Jonah, we covered some aspects here, but let's pick up a little bit again on the food for the future. A lot of the interest I found with the transition movement, not only in the United States, but around the world, has been what I think is a very appropriate renewed focus on agriculture, local agriculture, heirloom seeds, heirloom gardening, and not just the healthy organic aspect of it, although that's certainly critical, but appreciating local foods from economic standpoints, from an environmental standpoint. What's going on in the Transition Asheville area about foods?
Sure. Well, we do have a food action group. Transition is split, just for the listeners that don't know, into several categories of groups. We have about 11 right now. They have energy, they have spirituality, they have food, we have housing and building. So we break it into different action groups where each person, like myself, will take charge of that action group and really just take it and run with it, meaning we do our own meetings, we put our own events together, and then the common table, the head members of each action group, meets about every 2 weeks, and we report on what we're doing. And what that enables us to do is really reach a lot more of the community faster, because now we have 11 different groups, all with transition, all educating the community, working independently, but then still meeting every couple of weeks to collaborate, see what we could do better. And then a couple times a year we have joint events, which we'll talk about later in the show, the 88th celebration. And that really allows us to reach more people and get more information out that way. And that's what I think is so important, is it's getting the information out. For example, you also asked about food, and food is really the most important thing, obviously, because we have to eat. And buying local is something that we really push around here. We have community gardens, we do permaculture classes, we teach people how to grow their own food. Like the seed thing you said is very important, the heirloom seeds, and not getting the genetically modified seeds is to stay away from that. Asheville just started a food crisis committee, which was started by Gordon Smith here. And that meets, I think, once a month, and that really just has brought together really the community. A lot of us here at Transition go to that meeting and stay connected with that, and that's really cool that a council member started that group, because he himself is putting food as a priority for the upcoming changes and things that may be happening.
It's interesting because Asheville has a vibrant agricultural community, but we were collectively listed on one of the danger zones for food insecurity against all odds. So that at least it's a positive action moving in that direction.
Absolutely. Food is number one, and that's why Transition is such a great organization to be part of, because you could take action in getting involved with creating a network of food and local foods as part of your community, which a lot of us in the Transition movement are doing all over the country, by creating a database of all the local farmers, creating a database, a network, an email list, whatever you can do to keep the buy local connected. That's so important. You want to keep the local economy. You want to know where you can get fresh milk. You want to know where to get food. You want to know where to get seeds. So you need to have that network together. Most people in the bigger cities, you wouldn't know where to go to get strawberries or milk. So that's something else that the Transition movement does, is create these databases, the email lists of where the local farmers are to get certain items, and that's really important.
We have resources such as the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, which is looking at the actual farmers themselves and aspects of the distribution chain, as it were, around the area, so that it seems like that might be a little bit of a leg up for the Asheville group having these resources. In some other cities, I think it could be a tough row to hoe to try to get that information.
Big cities are big cities. You're not going to have as many farmers and local foods, certainly, which is why it's so important to be aware of that, because if things do happen, food prices spike, you're going to want to buy local. You're going to want to go to Joe, the local farmer, and get your milk and get your eggs. And so it's really important to do that. And even the city's transition movement, there's hydroponic, aquaponic systems in local cities. There are community gardens. So there are food supplies and ways to find out more about the food supply in your major city. It's just taking the first step in action by contacting your local transition group. And if there isn't a group there, you can get the book and get the chapter information and start your own transition group.
Is there a community garden in Asheville area that Transition is working on?
There is local gardens everywhere in Asheville. We're actually lucky on that part. But one of the initiatives that we're looking to do is to replace all or most of the trees here in Asheville with trees that bear fruit and things like that. So that's one of the projects that we've been working on. But we do have a couple community gardens. I myself, with our action group, we actually put one up a little north of the city here. But we just got together, we dug the garden, planted it, and we bared fruit from it. We did it at a local church, and it was really amazing to see the community come together. The firefighters came out and were like, what are you guys doing? We're like, we're just planting a garden, community garden. People aren't even really up to par on what that concept is. What is a community garden? What do you mean you can just come here and get food? It's like, it's amazing to see people just, like you said, awaken to something like exciting like that, where, hey, we can come here anytime and pick a strawberry because this is a community garden.
It's really so gratifying to me, because the look on people's face, just the sense that they have when they get into the dirt and they actually get into a garden. We have been collectively so disconnected from the ground, from gardening, from growing, and I'm not talking riding tractors over 500 acres to raise corn, but historically the idea of growing our own food, or at least having little garden patches, provides a natural connection, I think, just for the human spirit, the body and soul, the whole picture. And community gardens, it's hard not to see smiles especially when the kids find it.
Absolutely. And there's been tests and studies done recently that I've even read that talks about when you are in the garden and you're planted with the planet and your feet is touching that dirt, it's very healing for people to go out there and dig in the dirt. And like you said, you see their faces light up. I was over a friend's house a couple days ago at Lisa's house, which you're aware of, Lisa, from Earth Heart Network. And first thing she said when I went over there is, I'm in the garden, take off your shoes and jump on in here. And that's what I did. We went in there and picked some green beans and just, that 15, 20 minutes really helped ground me out and focus. And it's amazing.
It's a wonderful personal experience for me. I'm arguably the least productive gardener in the entire region, but it's nice to walk through the tomato plants and hope they might have a tomato, and pepper plants that might put out one or two, but it's still an excellent experience the whole way. So for those disconnected from the garden, it's time to try it.
And in fact, Ned, one of the things that we have as part of the transition, which is a action group, is the spiritual action group. And that's across the board with any transition group. It's an action group that really at the beginning of each group when we meet, we either close our eyes and just take some deep breaths or, just check in with each other. And it's really important because that first 5-10 minutes when we do the spiritual update of the action group, which Maureen runs here in Asheville, so hello to Maureen. She's really great at just focusing the intent, focusing the energy, and just getting everybody on the same page. It's really important for people to take a break and take a deep breath and just and do that, because so many people, just like you and me, I don't stop and do that as much as I know I need to.
Jonah, let's talk about the Housing and Building Committee.
I picked that committee because, like I said earlier, my father used to work with Buckminster Fuller, and he's an architect, so I was naturally into the housing and building aspect of it. And when I first joined the committee, one of the first things I wanted to know was, what is everybody doing together here in transition and just in general? We have over 60 self-sustainable groups here in Asheville. So one of the first projects that I wanted to do is something with everybody together, and I figure housing and building would be the one. So I started doing the homeless community, self-sustainable homeless community project about a year ago. And that's a big project that all of us are working on together. And it's really something that will pave the way and set a marker to show other communities of what you can do together, and bringing the community together as part of the project as well. So the housing and building to me is really one of the most important things. It's like the bricks and mortars of the transition movement.
Food, shelter, and clothing, and we seem to be covering it pretty well. Let's stick with the shelter for a moment. What are the plans for the housing for the homeless? Are they portable shelters, a single place, do-it-yourself tents? It just sounds like a really appropriate thing to be working on.
The breakdown of the model that we have right now, it's 11 geodesic domes using Buckminster Fuller's design, which are the most efficient on the planet, structurally, energy saving wise. And we have basically a little community built of these geodesic domes that is self-sustainable using solar power. We have gardens, aquaponics. We also have educational systems that we've got 3 different schools here that have K through 12 educational systems and other programs for drug abuse and stuff like that. So we're not just building a self-sustainable community and relocating some of the homeless population there, but we're also providing education, jobs. In fact, one of the jobs we already have up and going, one of the programs at the local church here with Reverend Brian Combs, we have the homeless knitting and making clothes, which will in turn sell on the website. So one of the job programs is already up and going, and we have a lot of support from the Asheville community. They're really supportive with a project like this.
Where could folks go to see some of the geodesic domes? I'm familiar with them, and they are wonderful, fascinating, and eye-catching, but I wouldn't be surprised if most of the listeners have never seen one in real life.
Sure. The website that we have a lot of information on is domain, D-O-M-A-I-N, domainecovillage.com. And if you click under projects, you will see the Domain Eco Village Homeless Project. Now, there was a similar project done to this in 1993. A real estate broker out in Los Angeles put his own money into the neighborhood and built 40 geodesic domes on about a half an acre in downtown Los Angeles for the homeless. So a project has been done like this before. It has been implemented, and it's really exciting to put a project like this in front of the community, where it's really going to be the community that has to come together to implement it.
What are the domes typically made of these days? I know the one that I worked with a team on, I didn't build it myself, but it taught me firsthand on the geodesic dome. We used plastic panels for the glazing to cover it. What's the project using with Transition Asheville?
It's wood. We keep it simple. You know, so many geodomes now. You have the monolithic domes made of cement. You have ones made of steel. But really, the design of the geodesic dome itself is such a strong structure. We use wood. We keep it simple. We want to make it where if supply lines or something like that happens where people can't get cement or can't get steel or can't get... You want to have a open source format where anybody can read the instructions and build a geodesic dome. Keep it simple.
Are you using the corner plates to join the geodesic corners, or actually just milling the wood and nailing it together?
We're milling the wood, nailing it together, but yes, there are corner connectors that keep it, and there is metal and you know, cement for the floor in the building. But you want to keep it as simple as possible so anybody in any community can do this. We don't want to just do it here, build it in Asheville, but we want to create it where someone in Africa or anywhere in the world can take this open source format that we created and duplicate it for their community anywhere in the world.
I'm willing to guess that it's not just geodesic domes. What else is the committee responsible for these days, bringing to the community?
Hands-on, you know, visual learning of something that housing and building that I feel really could benefit the people. To give you an example, we've had Jennifer from Build It Naturally downtown. She's come out, she showed us what paints to use, which are toxic, which are non-toxic. We've also went out and visited an earth bag home, which was really, really exciting to see an earth bag home built and how they built it, how much money it cost, things like that. An
earth bag home? I've got to jump in. What's an earth bag home?
An earth bag home is basically what you take is the sandbags, what you would see like at a barricades or army, you know, barricades, and you pack the sandbags really tight with earth and you put it together like that, like bricks, but except you're using the sandbags. And by doing it, it creates a very sound, very strong structure and costs almost nothing. The problem with it is it gets moldy and can really, you know, be not so sustainable if it starts crumbling or you build it, you know, in a way that's not correct. So really the terrain where you build the earthbag homes are really important.
That ventilation, the moisture, the ground flow of water, even moisture, people think of it as a flow of water, but it's just gentle moisture percolating through the ground itself could add up. But at the same time, earth bags work pretty well to hold rivers back, so I guess a little humidity wouldn't hurt. But that's got to be some really good thermal mass at the very least to help temper the indoor temperatures for the building.
Yeah, and it does work. Morgan, whose house we went out to, I videotaped it. It's up on YouTube, and that's what I like to do as well, is I videotape all the action groups so people can go back and get the information and watch it. And they built their entire house, living room and upstairs, and everything basically bottom line was less than $5,000. And they built an entire house with bathrooms, and it's a beautiful house. I mean, people that would look at it would have no idea it was an earthbag home. They stuccoed the outside and really made it really nice. So it's really an eye-opener to see a whole house built for less than $5,000 that's fully sustainable, not using supplies that are going to damage the earth or poison the earth or spread toxins into the planet.
Well, it's entirely possible that at least one of my listeners for our southern community is not interested in an earth bag home. What about folks that have a more conventional setup? What's the housing and building doing to integrate their interests and investment into this whole process of shelter?
The best example, I would say, was probably the guest speaker that I had come out, which was Rick Bayless. He is a home inspector on inspecting your home and making it more sustainable. He goes up in the attics, goes in the ducting of your AC. He really teaches people how to really cut down energy consumption on their house by doing little basic things, sealing the bottom of your door, sealing your cracks in your windows. He came out with a PowerPoint presentation and really showed people hands-on visually what they could do for a couple dollars to cut their power consumption down in their house. And that was a really important and really fun action group, meeting that we had with Rick.
I happen to know Rick Bayless. He's a wonderful person. And if the Olympics had a crawl space crawl race, I think he would be the world champion. He can go below the house to above the house. And it's amazing the savings that he's brought to so many people for so little money. A couple $100, he checks it out, goes through that. I mean, it's remarkable. I've had people tell me they got all their money back within 2 months in energy saving.
And he's done over, I believe, 10,000 homes is what he's at right now, of how many homes he's inspected. So you can imagine what impact Rick himself had on the whole of power consumption for this community. Just that one person, and people always say, well, what can we do? What can we do? Well, there's a perfect example of what one man has done to help better the community. And he loves doing it. He loves crawling those attics and showing people and teaching people. And that's the kind of people that you find in transition.
Let's look to the future. What are some of the upcoming events, ideas, and plans that Transition Asheville may be looking at?
All right, good question, Ned. We have a lot of things going on at Transition. Like I said, we have all different action groups, so you can always find different events and things we're doing, like movie nights, teaching people permaculture. The biggest event and thing we have coming up is the 88th celebration, which is coming up to celebrate our 88th Transition Town inauguration, you could say.
Now, that's 88 years as a transition town?
No, it's the 88th one in the country, which is a great number, the double infinity, so we're lucky to get that. And it's a celebration that we help the community meet a bunch of initiatives that when peak oil happens, we have some plans in place ready for the community to help them be more self-sustainable when peak oil happens and oil prices skyrocket.
And it's interesting because it's not really a certification in the sense that a lot of people might think of. It's reaching a series of benchmarks or goals by the community itself. And I'm kind of jumping into it, but only because there are a lot, hundreds, if not thousands, of communities dabbling in the transition movement, meeting in living rooms, meeting in community halls, meeting in their churches, and kind of sort of getting started and feeling it. But it's when a town, in effect, gets their act together and is really moving in a sustainable fashion that they are able to earn the Transition Town moniker, label, certification, whatever we call it. And correct me as I go if I'm wrong here, but I think that's important. It's not just that there's only 88, but 88 have already really hit some milestones.
Absolutely. And like I said, we're the 88th in America, but there is over 500 transition towns. So there is technically 500 towns that have put plans into place to help their community, to better their community when peak oil happens and before peak oil happens. So it's definitely a benchmark, and we're 88th, and we're really happy for that. It's our second year as the 88 transition town, and it's a milestone just to mark that, hey, we actually did something to make an impact on our community.
The 88th celebration is going to be on Pack Square in downtown Asheville, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. We got it at the biggest, best place, right center of the city, right across from City Hall. And it's going to be a great celebration. We have all the action groups coming out, setting up hands-on things. We have a solar power company, Sundance, coming out and setting up different, exhibits so people could see how things work. We have lots of music. We have several local music artists coming out. We're going to have food trucks. And really, it's just a celebration. But we will have some guest speakers like Gordon Smith will be there, and Howard Hanger, if we're lucky, and a lot of other city people that have really stepped up and expressed interest in self-sustaining the community. So we're going to have them as guest speakers. We have a proclamation that we have signed by the mayor, and we actually got it signed where we're an official transition day in Asheville. So the August 25th from 10 to 3 p.m. at Pack Square is where we're going to be celebrating, and it's an official, signed by the mayor, Transition Asheville Day.
How about some music?
We're going to have Wilhelm McKay. We have the French Broad River Band coming out. We also have a very young group of a 9, 10, and 12-year-old girl coming out. Then they're just amazing. They performed at Leaf. So we have a wide array of music artists from the young all the way up to some jazz and blues. So anyone of any likes of music that wants to just come out and celebrate with us, everyone's invited.
And this is a free event, am I correct?
This is free, absolutely. We'll have food trucks there, but the music, the workshops, and everything is for free.
And there are other events coming up where Transition Asheville is taking a community role. I know the group is going to be involved with the upcoming Southern Green Living Expo at the Asheville Civic Center. So from outdoors to indoors.
The people that will be representing Transition Asheville will be Dylan Hamilton and Jeannie Martin. They're really longtime members. Dylan's been around since the beginning, and Jeannie's very plugged into the community, so they will be representing Transition Asheville there at the expo. And another chance, hey, for people to get involved, ask us questions, and really find out what we're about.
Both Dylan and Jeannie are giving workshops, as I understand it, one Saturday, one Sunday. I'm not sure which and which, but these are actual, basically an hour-long classes on sustainability and permaculture.
Correct. Dylan's going to be doing the permaculture. He does that with his friend here locally in Asheville, and Jeannie will be doing the other one on sustainability. And it's a really, like I said, great opportunity for people to come down, ask us questions, see what we're about, and get some more information. And hopefully you could join us and get involved in making a difference.
Does Transition Asheville have an email newsletter type of a thing for, I'm thinking for folks, there's just so much happening, but the email calendars of activities have proved really effective for a lot of folks to try to keep up with this.
Yes, we do. We have a newsletter we send out on a bi-weekly basis, and we also always have updates and blogs and posts in our forums on our website, so people could always check in with the website and sign up for our newsletter and always stay up to date with different events and things that we're doing, and hopefully get you involved as well.
Well, let us get one more time. What's that website for folks to check out?
The website is www.transitionasheville.org, and people can go there again, sign up for our newsletter, and really learn information. We have lots of articles on there, lots of informational stuff, so people can go on and learn something about self-sustainability and what we're doing.
And one closing thank you to the community. We have been recording at the United Congregational Church here on Oak Street in Asheville in a number of rooms. We've bounced from one room to another as one community group came in, another came out. So the recorded live at the time background changes are not your imagination to the listener. Jonah Bolt with Transition Asheville on the Building and Housing Committee. Thank you so very much for taking the time today.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ned, for doing all the wonderful work that you're doing and spreading awareness and self-sustainability to all the listeners out there. You're doing a great job. So we thank you for giving us the opportunity to come on and tell the listeners what we're about.
Thank you for joining us in today's program of Our Southern Community. Archived programs are available at OurSouthernCommunity.org, and your comments and requests and suggestions are warmly welcomed at info@OurSouthernCommunity.org. This is your host, Ned Ryan Doyle. Have a great week.
And just do different workshops. We have guest speakers and stuff like that. On another level of existence, I would say, I have my own radio show, as you know, and that's been around for about 2 years now. That's Starseed Energy Radio, where I cover topics just like you. We cover political, geopolitical, earth changes, economics, stuff like that, and really dive into a lot of issues. There's a lot of things happening around the planet right now, and being self-sustained, I think, is the most important thing that people really need to get a grip on, and that's what I've been focusing a lot on my radio show. But I also work a lot with the community. I'm also a member and a partner of an organization called Living is So Big, which promotes life appreciation. So I'll be traveling with them for about 3 weeks, and a couple weeks going to Missouri and Utah doing speaking engagements and talking to people and talking really to the youth about waking up and appreciating life. You know, so many people are having hard times right now with the economy, and just it's a real great time for a lot of people around the planet, and promoting life appreciation is really important for people. Take a deep breath, take a sit back.
Together, looking toward the future, appreciating what we have in difficult times. And the transition movement has been defined in a few different ways, but it really seems as though it's literally a transition for people and society from an unsustainable paradigm into one that actually is sustainable.
Robert Hopkins started Transition Movement it's been about almost 5 years now, and Asheville is the 88th transition town, official transition town in the U.S., but there is over 500 official transition towns throughout the world. It has spread to every continent all over the world, and it's exactly what you said. It's about getting the communities back together again. So many people with the last 10, 20, 30 years have lost that sense of community. We're fortunate here in Asheville. We have a very tight, small community and very close, but most people, I've lived in New York and Florida, don't even know their neighbors. So the transition movement gives that sense of community back, as well as getting together local resources, local people.
Hello, friends. Welcome to our Southern Community, your public affairs program exploring the people and the issues of the environment, energy, and economics in our region. Today's program is an overview, a close look on the radio, if you will, with the transition movement, Transition Asheville, and there is so much to this discussion. We have with us Jonah Bolt, who is a Housing and Building Work Action Committee member on the team, and he does so much more. Jonah, welcome to the program.
Excellent. Thank you, Ned, for having me. How's it going?
I'm doing just fine. It is a pleasure to finally catch up with you. We're both busy guys.
And really appreciate how beautiful, how great it is to just be alive. And so many people don't even think about that because they're so worried about bills and food and this, that it's really an eye-opener, and it's magical to see people react and just, put down their reasons to live. That's what we have people do, write down, give us some reasons why you're alive, why life is so good. Other self-sustainable projects, initiatives that I've started, we're trying to do a self-sustainable community for the homeless. So that's another project I have going. Anything I could do to be of service and help to spread awareness about self-sustainability that I have become so passionate about is really important to me. So there's a number of different things that I do, but really it all weaves together on one platform to really help the community.
Your travels, Jonah, around the world and your experiences with so many groups like that gives me an opportunity to have us look back ever so slightly to the beginnings of the transition movement and Rob Hopkins and the British Isles and so forth. That's something that had, in many ways, that same vision of people working. And this has been, our third try to sit down.
Good to finally sit down and get it, though, because we lots to talk about.
And you do a lot more than just Housing and Building Action Committee. How about giving us a thumbnail sketch, because you're a busy man around town.
I recently moved to Asheville about 2 years ago, and when I moved here, I moved into a very progressive community, as most Ashevilleans, as they call them, know, and I started learning about this thing called self-sustainability, organic, living green. As I jumped into that and really dove into it head first, I found the transition movement, and that's where it first came from, with me getting involved with the whole movement of transition. My father used to work with Buckminster Fuller, with Bucky, building geodesic domes. So my whole life I've sort of been educated on it, on being self-sustained and structures like that, like the geodome, but never really got into it myself until I found the transition movement. So with that, I've been a member for about a year and a half now. Like you said, I'm head of the Housing and Building Group, and what we try to do is educate the community on different things they can do to cut energy in their house.